We believe and have always believed in this country that man was created in the image of God, that he was given talents and responsibilities and was instructed to use them to make this world a better place in which to live. And you see, this is the really great thing of America.
It's time to discover what binds us together, and finding it has the power to transform our world. That's what I believe. How about you? Hi everyone, I'm Doug DeVos, and welcome to Believe. You know, a few weeks ago, I had a great opportunity with Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, and we were at an event, at a dinner, and I had a chance to kind of lead a discussion with him. And if you know anything about Mike, he's a pretty entertaining guy, a pretty powerful guy, and so this discussion was a great joy. We want to share it with you. We want to have you hear what he had to say about the value of work and how he has lived it his whole life. So enjoy this episode, and thanks for joining us. Mike, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Long-standing, stand-together friend that has been part of this organization, very helpful, and has a wonderful, unique perspective on life and on work. And we're going to dive into it here. You know, Mike, we're going to chat a little bit, and then have a conversation with some of you. If you have questions or topics that you want Mike to talk about, so please kind of think about that a little bit, and we can facilitate that conversation in a little while.
You invited the Dirty Jobs guy to talk during dinner.
Yeah.
Just think about that. Let it settle.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, is it? We'll see.
not quite. So, Mike, you talk. Start with that. How did that start? How'd you become
Dirty Jobs?
the Dirty Jobs guy? Where'd that come from? How did you get into that?
Well, I was living in Baltimore, where I grew up, next to a guy named Carl Noble, who happened to be my granddad, and he built the house I was born in without a blueprint. He could take your watch apart, put it back together, blindfolded, just knew, right? And I was always in awe of him, and the handy gene, which I assumed I inherited, turned out to be recessive, and so my hopes and dreams of following in my pop's footsteps were not meant to be. He did, however, tell me so much great advice from Carl Noble, but he said, you can be a tradesman if you want, just get a different toolbox. And so I did. I went to a community college out of high school, studied all sorts of things I wasn't really interested in, including acting and singing and music and performing and writing and all of it. And way leads on the way, right? I got out of there. I got into the opera for a few years, then I went back to a state school and got a degree, and then I got in sales, and then I got in entertainment. And then for 20 years, I was just freelancing, minding my own business, impersonating a host for a lot of different cable channels. Yeah, I mean, seriously, it's a weird skill, but you can create the illusion of competence in short bursts, you know. And that's what I did, you know, for the longest time. And then one day I was working for CBS in San Francisco for a show called Evening Magazine, and I would go. It was a terrible little show. You probably saw it. Every local market had one. It comes on after the news, you know, and you basically, I would host it. I'd go to wineries, I'd go to museums, and I would just hit my mark and say my line. And one day my mom called me. I was in my cubicle, sitting there after a shoot, and she said, Michael, your grandfather turned 90 years old today. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if before he died, he could turn on the television and see you doing something that looked like work. Mothers, right?
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. So that was a moment. I was 42, and the next day I took my cameraman into the sewers of San Francisco, and I told this story at length about 5-6 years ago in Colorado. Poor Charles and Liz were sitting right in front of me trying to eat their chocolate mousse, and I walked them through the most horrific, true story of my life, where basically I told the story of a baptism in a river of poop, you know, where everything I thought I knew about my chosen profession turned out to be wrong, and I resolved to become a guest instead of a host, right? And this idea of highlighting real workers started as a segment on Evening Magazine called Somebody's Got to Do It. I was fired 2 weeks after it premiered because, as it turns out, people on Evening Magazine, they'd sit down at 7 o'clock to enjoy heart-tugging stories about a three-legged dog up in Marin overcoming canine kidney failure. And what they got was me crawling through a river of crap, and it just didn't play well with the meatloaf. Anyhow, they fired me, and I sold the idea to the Discovery Channel. It became Dirty Jobs. And that was 20 years ago. This week, we shot 3 Dirty Jobs here in Florida.
Yeah.
Finished the last one just yesterday down in West Palm. Drained a pool that hadn't been serviced in 17 years. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Anyhow, when I heard that you guys were doing your thing here, and I talked to my boss, Mary, and we looked at the calendar, we were like, well, be a great chance to come by and see what's new at Stan together. So that's how Dirty Jobs happen. I blame my mom and my grandpa, and now you, Doug.
All right. Well, I'm in a very great company there. I'm happy to be part of that whole crowd. And I did see photos from you in that pool. You look good.
Thank you.
He was floating. He had like a lounge, like a floating lounge chair. You were in there.
Yeah, it was nothing. It was algae about a foot thick, and it was so bad. It was so bad. I got there with the crew yesterday, and we just thought, there's no way we're going to be able to get this done. We did, but at a glance, it was so horrific that the only sensible thing to do was put on a bathing suit, get one of those big inflatable things, and get a pina colada, and just lie in the middle of it and shoot promos, which is what we did. Anyhow, if you value the idea of no 2 days being exactly the same, especially sequentially, I would recommend draining an algae-ridden pool and then sitting in a room full of really pretty successful people talking about the future of the country. It's good.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. We'll make a bit of a transition. This idea and your show and what you've highlighted has a huge and impactful role in our country. How do we create an environment where people see their ability to contribute in a variety of ways and not just one pathway?
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what you're doing there. You have your foundation and not just the show, it's the foundation and the work you're doing there. Talk to everybody about how you are approaching that, because it's a huge thing that we all see. We have tremendous respect for the work that we see happening in the world around us. We all see it happening, but yet sometimes people say, oh no, don't do that. We want you to do this.
Correct. Not that way, this way.
Yeah.
Everybody in the room, I think I'm preaching to the choir. It's just, there's so many different ways to come at a thing. And full disclosure, this was not the plan. Dirty Jobs wasn't the plan for the show, and the MicroWorks Foundation, which evolved out of the show, was not a plan either. But just by way of background, what happened in 2008, Dirty Jobs had been on the air about 5 years, and it had become the most successful, certainly most successful show on Discovery, maybe in cable. We were in 180 countries, and it was working, and I had, in that show, have you guys seen Dirty Jobs? I might just make it up. I don't. Who hasn't? Who hasn't seen the show, just so we can be clear? Anybody? Be honest.
Uh-oh.
Ma'am, get out. Not seen it. 20 years on the Discovery Channel. Never saw it. So, to answer your question, I'll just say, what's your name? Patty. That's nice. All right. So on the.
I'm gonna look it up next thing.
Yeah. Google it when I'm done. Okay. You'll see some images. No, it's the simplest show in the history of TV, except for maybe the Gong Show, right? I'm an apprentice. I show up, and what we do is show the viewer precisely what I experience. No writers, no pre-production, no second takes. We never did a second take in 20 years. It's a blisteringly unflinching, honest look at what it takes to drain and maintain a pool in West Palm. Right? We did 350 jobs. And so the cumulative effect of showing the country what actual work looks like in an unscripted way had a lot of delightful unintended consequences. One of them happened contemporaneously with the Great Recession in 2008, when it became clear that our country was headed for a rough time. And every morning on the road, I lived in Super 8s and Motel 6s for literally like 6-7 years. By the way, if the hotel has a number in its name, if it's written out like the Four Seasons, but if it's the Four Seasons, so I'm living in these motels, and I'm with my crew. And, we do a dirty job. We come back at night. I check the social media, because all the ideas for the show, by the way, came from the viewers. I was going to ask that, yeah. Right? Every single idea came from fans of the show, right? Because everybody knew the story of my granddad, and they would, they'd say, you think your granddad had an education. Wait till you see what my pop does. Sure, my brother, my cousin, my sister, my mom, my dad. So we're in this really great rhythm. But I walk out of the hotel, and I pick up the paper every morning, and the headlines are always the same. The unemployment's going up about 1/4 point every day, it seemed. 6.5, 7, 7.25, this. I mean, over weeks, it's like 10% unemployment. It's all anybody's talking about. Except on dirty jobs everywhere we went, we saw help wanted signs. And I thought, I don't know what's going on, but there's some other narrative in the country that nobody's talking about. And it has to do with the existence of opportunity. And that struck me as important, because so much of the unemployment narrative is based on the assumption that, well, if we had more jobs, we'd have less unemployment. But that wasn't the case in 2009. And it's certainly not the case today. There were 2.3 million open positions back then. Today, there are 11.1, right? Yeah. 11.1 million open jobs, the vast majority of which don't require a 4-year degree. And yet, today, as we sit here, we have $1.7 trillion in student loans on the books, and for whatever reason, we keep telling our kids that the best path for the most people is a 4-year path. Nothing wrong with it, just kind of pricey. And it seems like we're lending money we don't have to kids who are never going to pay it back to train them for jobs that don't exist anymore. Kind of crazy, right? So
outside that, it's a great system.
Yeah.
Outside that, it's
beyond
great.
that, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of leapfrogging around. That's where we are today. But in 2008, and the reason I'm here tonight is because I was just starting to see it, right? And I would go out with the dirty jobbers that we work with, and so many of them were entrepreneurs, small business owners. An extraordinary number were multimillionaires. You would have never known it, because they were covered in mud and grime and slime and worse, right? And the show wasn't about making that point. It was about honoring the dignity of work. But it was a heck of a thing to challenge the conceptions of success in a show. And so I wanted to do something for the industries that had allowed my show to prosper and shine a light on the opportunities that existed in mining, in energy, in agriculture, in the big tentpole industries that, for whatever reason, so many people, including me, have become disconnected from. And so I started a foundation called MicroWorks, which was really a PR campaign for those opportunities. That morphed into a trade resource center. Fans of the show, aside from programming it, were also building this online resource that would essentially prove the existence of jobs. You could type in any zip code and see the jobs that were available there that didn't require a 4-year degree. And then you could click on links that would explain what kind of training would be necessary to do this. And so that all felt sensible and good. And I went to Congress a few times and banged my shoe on the table and talked about the need for better PR. And that really was our foundation for the first couple of years. And we started to raise some money for work ethics scholarships. And to this day, in fact, in a month or two, we'll give away another $1 million in very small increments to kids who make a persuasive case for themselves, who submit videos and references and write essays. I don't care about their GPA. I care about their attendance. I want to make a case for work ethic. And that resonated with Charles, and it resonated with a lot of people who support what we do. And so today, to answer your question, I'm sitting here because now we've assisted over 1,400 people who have learned to weld, who've become steam fitters, plumbers, pipe fitters, electric, HVAC. And early on, we had some success because I could tell their stories, anecdotally. But today, we're making all kinds of videos. We tell their stories. They come back, and you wouldn't believe it. The stories we hear from people who took a $6,000 work ethic scholarship and learned to weld, and today own 4 vans, a mechanical contracting company, 12 employees, and are killing it. So that's how it happened, and that's why it's still happening, because we still have $1.7 trillion in student loans, 11 million open jobs, and a skills gap that's getting wider, and frankly, scaring the hell out of anybody who's paying attention.
Yeah. Well, amen to those 1,400 kids that you've connected with, huh? Let's hear it for that. Let's hear it for that. I'm going to ask if there's any questions or topics from our friends at dinner here tonight that you want Mike to talk about. We're going to put you on the spot, Mike. I got a couple others if everyone's too timid. This is a timid crowd.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. All right, Hans, come on, step up, make it happen.
Thank you all so much for having us here, Mike. I want to say your best work was actually the narration job on Deadliest Catch. Oh, thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
Big fan. I'm sorry you didn't get to do it in person, but the narration, your golden baritone is, you're the next Frank Sinatra.
Don't make it weird, Hans.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm a big fan. You touched on it earlier, and it was, it was 11 million jobs open and only, 9 million job seekers, and yet we still have 9 million job seekers. What is, in your mind, the COVID really reset a lot of things, some for better, some for worse. What is it that you think are sort of holding back the meeting, that 11 million openings and 9 million seekers? Is it just simply they've been displaced, they moved to a different part of town, different part of the country? Are there just a wage gap? What are your thinks the issues are, and how can we fix it?
Yeah, there's not a snappy answer, obviously. But if there were, I would say stigmas, stereotypes, myths, and misperceptions that surround the trades to this day. It's very, very powerful, and it's hard to undo, but you're talking about 50 years of pop culture and advertising and marketing campaigns that reinforce, look, if I say plumber and ask you to picture the guy, he's 250 pounds and he's got the butt crack and the whole routine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Those images are seared into our retinas. And so too are so many misperceptions about the kind of money that they make and the kinds of lives that they can lead. And the balance of having a trade that you can fall back on and the way you can provide for your family. And there are just so many things that conspire to make it very, very difficult for parents and guidance counselors to feel really good about saying, hey, wait, look at all of the opportunity. And so I think a part of what happened, Hans, that really is going to be a very difficult thing to correct was the removal of shop class from high school. Mm-hmm. Very, very tough, right? Yeah. And so to understand how insidious that was, it's not like we woke up one day and said, there's no money, budget cuts, no more shop. Way before it was called shop, you'll remember, Tommy, it was called the industrial arts. Yeah. And we took the art out, and the industrial arts became vocational technology. Then it became VOTech. Then it became shop. Then we walked it around the barn and shot it in the head, right? Because then it was easy to get rid of because it had become a vocational consolation prize in the eyes of millions of parents and guidance counselors. And in the midst of this push for college, which we needed, by the way, in the 70s, you'll recall, we needed more people matriculating, getting into higher ed, pursuing big degrees. But like most PR, we weren't satisfied to make the case for college and leave it alone. We had to turn it into a cautionary tale. We had to say, if you don't go this way, you're going to wind up over here turning a wrench or doing something beneath you, right? And so once that landed, once that really became a part of the transaction, it became really, really difficult to change that mindset, and it still is difficult. So that's why I'll say stigma, stereotypes, myths, and misperceptions. We have to fight them on every single level. We have to do it with humor. We have to do it with TV shows like Dirty Jobs and Deadliest Catch. We have to do it with foundations, modesty aside, like MicroWorks, which is a micro endeavor, and Stand Together, which is a macro endeavor. We need to tell the stories. We can't just preach to the choir. You guys need a kind of platform that allows a show, essentially, a person. Who could we get?
Any ideas? Any ideas? Okay.
We need somebody to tap the country on the shoulder in a regular, periodic way and say, hey, what about her? What about him? Get a load of this guy, right? This country, in my view, is starved not just for shows like Deadliest Catch and Dirty Jobs, which are great. They're starved to meet people who wake up agitated because the world's not the way they want it and they believe they have a solution. We want to meet those people because they're interesting as all get out. And they're also the neighbors we all wish we had. So there's a future where all the good work you're doing and all the companies you're supporting and the foundations you're championing, where all that lives under an umbrella, not as a foundation, not as a lecture, not as a sermon, but as an entertainment proposition. Because if you don't entertain first and foremost, trust me, your mother's going to be on the phone telling you to do something that looks like work. And anyhow, thanks, Hans.
That's great, great. We have time for a couple more questions. Anyone want to raise something? Please.
Just curious, is your mom proud of you now?
No, she's never really liked me. My mother, by the way, Peggy Rowe is her name. She has just finished her third book. She's 84 this year. She published her first book when she was 80.
Wow.
It's number 4 on the New York Times list. 2 years later, she did her second, and now she's doing her third. And yeah, my mom's a legend on social media. She has her own following. I started putting her in commercials a few years ago. And my dad, God help me, they're a nightmare. They got their own agent, they got their publishers. But you know what? She says she's proud of me, and I think she is. The bigger question is, I think of my pop. I think of Carl Noble. And I hope he's looking down. I think he's probably bemused because, for a long time, that guy, he was the tradesman's tradesman. And as much as I wanted to follow in his footsteps, I know he wanted me to follow in his footsteps. Instead, he got to see me sing opera for 8 years and then sell stuff in the middle of the night on QVC. And the last thing he saw was the first episode of Dirty Jobs.
All right.
And he gave me a thumbs up. So I hope he's good with it.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So thank you so much for being here. I'm a huge fan. My mother is a huge fan. I came from a family that worked hard and are super proud of it. But are you satisfied? My question is, what's next? And are you achieving what you set out to do, and what really makes you happy?
Well, yes, I'm satisfied. I'm not content. But I'm also aware that, if you ask the goal of MicroWorks, the first stated goal was to close America's skills gap. That's never going to happen. I know that. So there's a Sisyphean quality to all great endeavors, and everybody in this room knows that. we're not going to get, there is no net zero. There's no COVID zero. There's no closing the skills gap. But there's a great Sisyphean challenge to it. There's elegance and there's dignity in knowing that it's an unreachable star, right? But you have to try. And so it took a while for me to really not just accept that, but to be okay with it, and then to like it. File it under managing expectations, right? I'm not going to succeed in the stated goals of the foundation. But what happened that changed everything for me was, like I said, the first few years, it's me telling you what I think I know. And then it's me pointing to a website that was built that moved the needle and feeling kind of good about it. But then it's the circling back and finding people we helped 4 and 5 years ago. I can't tell you what that does. That, you know, every couple of weeks we put out a new video, and one of the most recent ones was a woman named Chloe Hudson, who 5 years ago applied for a work ethic scholarship because her dream of becoming a plastic surgeon had come down to borrowing approximately $400,000. $400,000 to go to medical school. That was the all-in long-term cost. And she just freaked out at the last second, and we gave her $6,000, and she learned to weld. Now, Chloe Hudson looks like she fell off the cover of Glamour. Fake eyelashes, beautiful, statuesque, sassy, smart, and as it just so happens, a savant with a welding torch. So she winds up in New England working at a nuclear power plant, and now she's in North Carolina with Joe Gibbs Racing, okay? She makes $160,000 a year. She has zero debt. Our mission now is to get Chloe Hudson on a billboard, on a poster. I got her on Fox and Friends a couple months ago, sat down right next to her, and got her story out there. So all of this really comes down to whatever your story is, tell it, you know, and if it's not persuasive, tell it better. And if no one's listening, tell it louder. Right? And be a jagged little pill. Be Sisyphus. Be Quixote. You know, because it's a great story. What you guys are doing is extraordinary. And the guys I met today and the people Mary's introduced me to, every story, every organization you all are assisting is headline news, if we say it is. I say we should.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Huh? Any more? Maybe one more if we can. Otherwise I'm going to. Oh, we have one more in the back there. Alan's got a.
Oh God, it's Alan.
You can do it. Hang in there, Mike. You can do it.
Mike, obviously, I've been a long-time fan of yours. 2 questions, one less serious and one more serious. The first one, what's the dirtiest job you ever did? And the second one is, I have to think that you've been probably excommunicated from Hollywood and all that matters in Tinseltown. And yet Hollywood seems to be in lockstep with a government that seems to be promulgating these ideas of making loans to students to get an education that for a job that doesn't exist anymore. So what's the key? Is it to sell an idea to Hollywood because obviously they're just self-interested. So do you sell them an idea that makes them money that is like a Scott Strode idea? Is that the solution? Or is it just hopeless and you wait for them to catch on to your idea?
Oh, I mean, if it weren't somewhat hopeless, it wouldn't be a challenge.
Right.
But yes, you argue from the middle, first and foremost. You know, you have to. If you can, you have to. If you can't entertain them, then there's nothing there. Dirty Jobs, full disclosure, was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I didn't even know it. That's how super secret it was, right? I'm a farm boy from Baltimore County. I didn't live in Hollywood. I did some time there, but I was never part of the machine. I never had an agent. I never had a manager. I never had a publicist. I never had a lawyer. All I have is Mary, who is all those things. So we were able to navigate from the perimeter. So I was in it, but not of it. So what happened, Alan, honestly, is when Dirty Jobs became a Hollywood hit and launched literally 38 other TV shows that evolved out of that, I suddenly realized I had Forrest Gumped my way into the grown-up table, and I'm sitting there. And so I started to do specials on Dirty Jobs, and then I did it right under the network's nose. I did a special called Brown Before Green, where I argued that while we all wanted a healthy planet, and while everybody agreed with sensible conservation, a big chunk of the country didn't necessarily want to follow Al Gore or Leonardo DiCaprio off to wherever they were going. And I did this because I met a farmer, a pig farmer named Bob Combs, and I asked him what he thought about green. And he said, "Green? That's a stupid color." And I said, what do you mean a stupid color? It's spring, it's renewal. He goes, bullshit. Let me tell you what green is. Green is the color of rot. It's the color of decay. It's gangrene. Green is the color of money. It's the color of envy. Who in the world would want to align themselves behind a color like that? Now, brown. Brown is the color from which all green grows. Brown is steadfast and eternal. Brown is the soil. Brown is the dirt. And I'm like, I'm hearing this from a pig farmer in Vegas. So I do a special called Brown Before Green, where we look at the alternative ways to foster a healthy planet that doesn't necessarily align with only one political party. The Discovery Channel puts this on the air in 2008 on the same day that they launch a new channel called Planet Green. So I tell you this because your plans don't matter in Hollywood. Your strategy doesn't matter. They'll make a fool of you. They'll say no. If you tell them what you want to do, it's not going to happen. You have to bob and weave and play the cards you get, and then suddenly you have a chance to take a farmer's philosophy and turn it into a special that airs in prime time. That moves the needle. So too did a special called Safety Third, where we took a look at the unintended consequences of elevating safety above everything else in the world. It wasn't a smart aleck attempt to take unnecessary risk. It was a reasoned attempt to question the whole notion of telling your customer that nothing matters more to them or to you than their safety. That kind of thing fosters complacency. And I made a whole case for it and got it on the air. It was nominated for an Emmy. Didn't win, but it was nominated.
Oh, that's all right.
Right?
That's pretty good.
So my answer, Alan, honestly, is you stick to your prime directive. And if in Hollywood, your prime directive is you have to entertain. And if you're lucky enough to get a program that gives you a toehold, then pick your battles, pick your specials, tell your stories. And thanks to that, and Dirty Jobs has been nothing but very, very good to me. But something else happened that you guys should know about in the way of TV, because it might be instructive to some of the conversations you're having around PR. We did a show 3 years ago on Facebook called Returning the Favor. And Returning the Favor was a look at the neighbors you wish you had, people in your community, doing something nice that they cared about. There were many 501c, but there were also just regular bloody do-gooders. We treated these people like Access Hollywood treats Brad Pitt. And we did 100 episodes. That show did win an Emmy, but because it was Facebook, they canceled it a week after we won the Emmy, because they're Facebook. Doesn't matter. But again, you have to entertain first, and then maybe you get to scratch what itches. With regard to your first question, the answer is replacing a ruptured lift pump at a wastewater treatment plant. That is the dirtiest job in the world. A lift pump is a 4-ton motor, and it lives at the bottom of a 5-story silo. You got it? I don't think you do.
I don't think so.
I don't think you do. This is way beyond Henry Kissinger. This is, when that pump breaks, that pumping chamber fills with sewage, because in this case, the good people of St. Louis, they don't know it's broken. They keep flushing their toilet. Alarms go off. Men in woefully inadequate Tyvek suits descend spiral staircases, and they muscle their way through a series of watertight doors. And then you dog paddle through the muck to the lift pump, and you crawl on top of it. This is the good part. You crawl on top, and from 5 stories above, a man in a crane lowers a cable. And you grab the cable, and you cinch it off to the top, and you hang on, Alan. And when they say go, they lift, they hoist this 4-ton motor out of a room about this size that's just literally filled with the worst thing you can imagine. And the sound a ruptured lift pump makes when it breaks the seal of crap that's been holding it to the floor, that, my friend, will haunt your dreams.
Oh my gosh. You always want to end on a positive, uplifting mess.
You're welcome.
That's right. There's a lot of appreciation going on there. Mike, thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Thank you, most of all, for what you do to make these issues that are so important to us, important to you, but also entertaining, so the message gets across to other people. So we can tell the story, and more people can see the value in work.
You're welcome.
Whatever it may be. Thank you. Sure. Thank you, sir. Thanks. All righty. Mike, thanks so much. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening to the podcast with Mike Rowe. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Just such a wonderful person, very insightful, incredibly helpful as we think about the value of work and all the jobs that we do. So thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you the next time.